The year is 1764. Britain's Chief Minister George Grenville has introduced the Sugar Act, which imposes a new customs duty tax on the American colonies. He claims that money must be raised to pay for the colony's defense, but many colonists protest. They see the Sugar Act as an illegitimate tax imposed by a British Parliament that lacked the authority to do so. Opponents of the Sugar Act have an eloquent spokesman in Boston attorney James Otis. Known simply as the Patriot, Otis has inspired men like John Adams, who described his speaking style as a flame of fire. Otis now uses the written word to ignite a spark beneath the hated tax. In a stirring pamphlet, he questions the scope of Parliament's sovereign authority.
An original supreme sovereign, absolute and uncontrollable. Earthly power must exist in and preside over every society, from whose final decisions there can be no appeal but directly to heaven. It is therefore originally and ultimately in the people.
The earthly power referred to by James Otis is known as popular sovereignty. It is the supreme power of a people to shape and authorize their government. Popular sovereignty would become the most fundamental principle of the U.S. Constitution. Since the beginning of the independent state in Europe in the 16th century, philosophers and statesmen recognized the need for a sovereign power. In the words of the great English jurist William Blackstone, sovereignty means the supreme, irresistible, absolute, uncontrolled authority in the state beyond which there is no appeal. Throughout most of Europe, kings and despots had claimed this supreme authority as their divine right. England took this independent sovereign power away from its kings at the end of the 17th century and placed it in Parliament, its supreme legislature. But Britain's attempt to assert the sovereign authority of its Parliament over the American colonies was a claim the colonists could not accept. They believed they were not represented in that supreme legislature and feared what so great a power could do to their individual rights. Denying the absolute authority of Parliament over them, the colonists invoked the ideas of philosopher John Locke. They argued that all legitimate government derives from the consent of the governed, and if a government depends upon the people's consent, then the people can claim the power of sovereignty. The U.S. Constitution enshrines this principle of popular sovereignty and declares it in its preamble. It is we, the people, who ordain and establish the Constitution under which we agree to be governed. In this way, the framers gave the concept of sovereignty a new meaning, altogether different from that used in the Old World. Instead of a legal power exercised by a government, sovereignty became a constituting power of the people authorizing that government to exist. The words of the Constitution are literally an expression of the people's sovereign will, both enabling and controlling those who govern them. Many people confuse popular sovereignty with popular government, or democracy, but they are not the same thing. Popular sovereignty means that people can choose any form of government they wish. A representative democracy is the form of government chosen by the framers. Thus, Americans exercise their power of self-government in two ways: by choosing their public officials and policies through the day-to-day processes of democracy, and by using their sovereign power on rare and special occasions to ratify, amend, or even, if they so choose, abolish their Constitution.